The twin suns of Ecosphere III cast long, jagged shadows across the ice crystal plains as Captain Mara Klein adjusted her thermal suit settings. The temperature readout on her wrist panel showed negative 42 degrees Celsius. Balmy, by this planet's standards. She squinted against the glare reflecting off the fractured landscape, her breath forming small clouds inside her helmet as she surveyed the damage to her research freighter. "Just my luck," she muttered, tapping the communicator embedded in her collar. Day 27 of solo rotation, and I hit a debris field that wasn't on any of the charts. Only static answered her. The long-range comms had been the first systems to fail when the freighter's port stabilizer clipped what appeared to be an ancient satellite fragment. Now, the ship listed awkwardly on the crystalline surface, its hull scarred with a 10-meter gash that had vented 3 compartments before the emergency protocols sealed the breaches. Mara sighed, her practiced eyes already calculating repair times and material requirements. She was good at this part, the technical challenges, the methodical problem-solving. It was why she'd been selected to pilot this mission alone, transporting the cargo of rare biocrystals to Research Outpost Helios. The crystals were supposedly stable, but Command wasn't taking chances with a full crew after what happened on the Vanguard expedition. Biocrystals secure. Primary power at 63%. Backup systems nominal, she recited. More for the comfort of a human voice than for the ship's dead recording systems. Hull integrity compromised but contained. Life support stable but limited to bridge, cargo bay, and primary quarters. With precise movements born from years of emergency drills, Mara unclipped the repair kit from her belt and began extracting the plasma welding torch. The procedure was straightforward. Stabilize the damaged sections, apply temporary sealant, restore navigation, and limp back to the nearest outpost. 6 days of careful flying. Perhaps 7 if she conserved fuel. "Just another day at the office," she said, forcing a grin no one could see. The first warning came as she approached the hull breach. Torch extended before her, like a medieval knight's lance. A faint vibration beneath her magnetic boots, almost imperceptible through the thick soles. Mara paused, frowning. Ecosphere 3 wasn't known for seismic activity. Its crystalline core remained largely inert, except during the biannual solar alignments, which were still weeks away. She bent down, placing her gloved palm flat against the ice. There it was again, a rhythmic tremor, like distant machinery. Then her suit's proximity alarm screamed alive. The stealth mine erupted from beneath the ice less than 20 meters away, its matte black surface absorbing rather than reflecting the harsh sunlight. Mara had only enough time to register its distinctive hexagonal shape, not debris at all, but a Talon Consortium device, before it slammed into the already damaged hull of her ship. The impact threw her backward, her magnetic boots tearing free from the hull surface. She tumbled through the near vacuum of Ecosphere's thin atmosphere, managing to activate her suit's emergency thrusters just before she would have crashed into a jagged crystal formation. Heart-hammering. She hovered momentarily before bringing herself back to the ship's surface. What she saw made her blood run cold. The mine had detonated precisely where she'd been standing moments before. It wasn't a high-explosive device. Those would have obliterated her freighter entirely. Instead, it had released an electromagnetic pulse that had instantly fried every active system in her ship. Through the new, jagged hole in the hull, she could see the navigation console sparking uselessly, the life support indicators dark. "No, no, no," Mara whispered, scrambling toward the breach. Her suit's oxygen would last 18 hours at most. Without the ship's life support, she'd freeze to death long before she suffocated. As she reached the edge of the torn metal, another system activated, one she hadn't triggered. The emergency beacon, buried deep within the ship's core and protected by multiple redundancies, powered up with a high-pitched whine. Its distinctive pulse would reach the nearest outpost in approximately 4 days. Too late for her, but early enough to recover the precious cargo and her body. Unless someone closer picked up the signal. Which, in Talon Consortium territory, was the last thing she wanted. Mara worked tirelessly for the next 3 hours, her movements growing more desperate as the ship's temperature dropped precipitously. Without power to the heating elements, the natural cold of Ecosphere 3 was penetrating every compartment. Ice crystals had already formed on the interior bulkheads, growing like alien fungi across metal and composite surfaces. She had managed to jury-rig a connection between her suit's power cell and one of the auxiliary field generators, enough to create a bubble of warmth around the bridge. But the repair wouldn't last more than a day. The main power core needed direct intervention, and that required venturing into the most heavily damaged section of the ship. Checking her oxygen levels, 14 hours remaining, Mara made her decision. She'd have to cannibalize parts from the less critical systems to repair the field generators that protected the power core. It was her only chance. The cargo hold was eerily silent as she made her way through the darkened corridors, her helmet light casting sharp shadows that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. The biocrystals in their containment units glowed with a faint blue luminescence, pulsing slowly like a sleeping giant's heartbeat. Mara averted her eyes from them. The last technician who'd stared too long had experienced vivid hallucinations for weeks afterward. She had just begun removing a circuit board from a non-essential life sign monitor when her suit sensors registered movement outside the ship. Not the random drift of ice crystals in the planet's light gravity, but deliberate, purposeful motion. Mara froze, her hands still buried in the monitor's guts. The Talon Consortium had found her already? Impossible, unless they'd been tracking her all along, waiting for her to trip one of their mines. But why not simply destroy the ship entirely? Why leave her alive to witness what came next? Unless they wanted the biocrystals intact, which meant they needed her technical expertise to safely extract them from their containment units. With silent determination, Mara slipped the circuit board into her repair pouch and drew her plasma torch. A poor weapon, but the only one she had. She would not surrender her cargo without a fight, even if it meant dying on this forsaken iceball. The external sensors registered the airlock cycling. Something was coming aboard. Mara positioned herself behind a bulkhead, heart hammering so loudly she was certain whatever waited on the other side of the door would hear it. The inner airlock door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, backup power operating on minimal systems, and a figure stepped through. It was not what she had expected. The being stood nearly 2 meters tall, encased in what appeared to be a sleek repair suit, not unlike her own, though of distinctly alien design. Where Mara's suit was bulky and utilitarian, this one seemed to flow around its wearer's form like liquid metal, with strange protuberances at the joints and what looked like crystalline inlays along the spine. The helmet was opaque, offering no glimpse of the face within, but Mara could see a faint glow emanating from within, pulsing in time with the biocrystals. Mara raised her plasma torch defensively, its blue flame casting weird shadows across the cargo hold. "That's far enough," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "This ship and its cargo are Earth Federation property. State your identity and purpose." The figure tilted its helmet slightly, as though considering her words, but made no sound in response. Instead, it raised one gloved hand, pointing past her toward the ship's aft section, where the power core lay dark and dormant. "If you think I'm letting you anywhere near my engines, you can think again," Mara said, taking a step forward to emphasize her point. "I don't know what species you are or what you want, but—" The alien's hand began to glow beneath its glove, the same pulsing blue as the biocrystals. With deliberate slowness, it pointed again toward the engine room, then touched its chest with its other hand. "A universal gesture. I can help." Mara hesitated. The rational part of her mind screamed that this could be a trick, that no alien species with friendly intentions operated in this sector of space. But another part, the part that calculated her remaining oxygen and the rapidly dropping temperature inside the ship, whispered that she had few options left. "You want to help repair the ship?" she asked, lowering the torch slightly, but keeping it ignited. The alien nodded once, a curiously human gesture that made Mara wonder if it had been studying her species. Then, it moved toward the corridor, leading to the engine room, its movements fluid and precise, stopping at the threshold to wait for her. An invitation or a trap? "I'm watching you," Mara warned, following at a cautious distance. "One wrong move, and you'll find out what this torch can do to whatever's inside that fancy suit." If the alien was intimidated, it showed no sign. It simply continued down the corridor, occasionally touching the wall with those glowing fingertips, as though reading the ship's condition through the metal itself. The engine room was in worse shape than Mara had feared. The EMP from the mine had not only shut down the systems, but had fused several critical components. Repair would require not just reconnection, but total replacement of certain elements. Elements she didn't have in her limited emergency supplies. The alien moved directly to the central power core, examining the damage with what appeared to be professional interest. It gestured to Mara, then to the secondary control panel, the one she'd been planning to cannibalize for parts. "You want me to work on that while you handle the core?" she asked, surprised by the logical division of labor. Another nod. Then, the alien made a series of gestures with its glowing hands, tracing patterns in the air that somehow seemed meaningful, though Mara couldn't decipher them. "I don't understand your language, or whatever that is," she said, frustration edging into her voice. "We need to establish some basic communication if we're going to work together." The alien appeared to consider this problem. Then, with decisive movements, it approached the frosted viewport that looked out onto the crystalline landscape. With one finger, it began to etch diagrams into the thin layer of ice that had formed on the interior surface, schematics. Mara realized with growing amazement. Repair schematics for her ship's power core, with modifications she'd never seen before, but that, intuitively, she recognized would work. "You're an engineer," she breathed, comprehension dawning. "Or whatever your species calls someone who fixes things." The alien stepped back from its impromptu drawing board and gestured toward the schematics. Then to the damaged core. Then back to Mara with an expectant tilt of its helmet. "All right," she said, making her decision. "Let's work together, but I'm still keeping my eye on you." For the next few hours, they fell into an unexpected rhythm of collaboration. Mara would work on one component, while the alien focused on another, occasionally meeting to compare progress through diagrams scratched into ice or metal surfaces. The language barrier remained, but a different kind of communication emerged, one based on shared technical knowledge and the universal principles of energy, matter, and physical law. There were moments of frustration and near disaster. Once, the alien attempted to reroute power through a junction that, in Earth ships, would have been standard procedure, but in Mara's modified freighter would have triggered a catastrophic overload. She barely stopped it in time, physically placing herself between the alien and the control panel, shaking her head vehemently. The alien had paused. Helmet tilted in what Mara was beginning to recognize as its questioning posture. She had taken a deep breath and sketched out the actual power flow configuration on a nearby surface, showing how the standard routing would cause a feedback loop. The alien had studied her diagram for a long moment, then nodded, its glowing hand tracing a modified solution that would work with her ship's unique setup. Progress was slow but steady. The temperature inside the ship stabilized as they managed to restore partial power to the environmental systems. Mara's oxygen supply remained a concern, but less pressing now that the ship's recyclers were functioning at minimal capacity. It was during their 6th hour of work together, as they struggled to reconnect the primary field generator to the power distribution network, that everything changed. The connection required manipulating delicate crystalline filaments within a narrow access port, a task Mara's bulky gloves were too unwieldy to perform. She had been about to suggest they try a different approach when the alien stepped forward, positioning itself before the access port. Then, with methodical precision, it began to remove its repair suit. Mara's instinct was to back away, to raise her torch defensively once more. But curiosity rooted her to the spot as the alien's gloves came off first, revealing hands that were almost human in structure, but covered in what appeared to be translucent scales that glowed from within, the source of the blue light she'd seen earlier. Next came the helmet, lifting away to reveal a face that was both alien and hauntingly familiar. The being had features arranged similarly to a human's: eyes, nose, mouth in roughly the expected positions, but its skin held the same translucent, luminescent quality as its hands. Beneath that skin, Mara could see delicate patterns of light flowing like liquid circuitry, pulsing in complex rhythms. The alien's eyes were large, pupilless orbs that shimmered with an inner radiance. And what Mara had taken for hair was actually a crown of fine, crystalline filaments that caught and refracted the dim emergency lighting. The alien continued removing its outer suit layers, revealing a form that was humanoid, but distinctly different, more slender, with elongated limbs and a torso etched with the same circuitry-like patterns that adorned its face. These patterns shifted and flowed as the alien moved, sometimes matching the pulse of the biocrystals in the cargo hold, sometimes beating to a rhythm all their own. Mara realized she was staring and forced herself to look away, though not before noticing that the alien's expression, if she was interpreting it correctly, held no hostility or aggression, only focused determination. I didn't expect," she stammered, unsure what protocol covered first contact with a bioluminescent humanoid while stranded on an ice planet. The alien made no response other than to turn its attention back to the access port. With its suit removed, it extended one slender arm deep into the opening, the glow beneath its skin intensifying. Mara watched, transfixed, as the light patterns along the alien's arm synchronized with the damaged systems, the filaments at its fingertips extending like living tools to interface directly with the ship's technology. The power core hummed to life, the lights in the engine room brightening as systems came online one by one. Mara's diagnostic panel showed power levels rising steadily, environmental controls resuming normal function, navigation and communication systems rebooting. You're interfacing with my ship," Mara whispered, amazement overwhelming her earlier caution. "Your biology is compatible with our technology somehow." The alien withdrew its arm from the access port and turned to face her. For the first time, Mara saw its light patterns shift into what seemed like an expression, a subtle reorganization of luminescence that suggested satisfaction, perhaps even pride. Then, it did something truly unexpected. It placed one glowing hand on its chest and made a series of pulsing light patterns that somehow resolved into a concept in Mara's mind. "Karina, is that your name?" Mara asked, tapping her own chest. "I'm Mara, Captain Mara Klein." The alien, Karina, repeated the gesture. The light patterns subtly different this time, and Mara felt rather than heard the echo of her own name in her mind. "Well," she said, offering a tentative smile. "Thank you, Karina. You've just saved my life." Karina's luminescent patterns shifted again, this time suggesting something like acknowledgement or perhaps modesty. Then, with the same deliberate care as before, she, Mara decided, though she had no real basis for assigning gender to this alien being, began to redon her repair suit, leaving only her hands and face exposed. With the immediate crisis averted, Mara found herself facing a new set of questions. Who was this alien engineer? Why had she come to Mara's aid? And what would happen now that the ship was operational again? The emergency beacon continued to pulse its distress signal into space. Someone would respond eventually, either a Federation rescue team or, more worryingly, whoever had planted the stealth mine. They had time, but not unlimited time. "Are you hungry?" Mara asked abruptly, realizing she hadn't eaten in nearly 12 hours. "I mean, do you consume sustenance? Food?" Karina tilted her head, light patterns shifting in what Mara was beginning to recognize as contemplation. Then she nodded, following Mara, as she led the way to the small galley adjacent to her quarters. The ration packs in Mara's emergency supplies were designed for human consumption, but she reasoned that if Karina could interface with Earth technology, perhaps Earth food wouldn't be entirely incompatible with her biology. She selected the most basic option, a nutrient bar with minimal processing, and offered it to her alien companion. Karina examined the bar carefully, her luminescent fingertips tracing its surface. Then, with cautious dignity, she broke off a small piece and placed it in her mouth. Her expression shifted, light patterns flaring briefly, before settling into a steady rhythm that Mara interpreted as neither disgust nor delight, but simple acceptance. They ate in silence, an oddly domestic scene given the extraordinary circumstances. Mara found herself studying Karina's features, trying to decipher the meaning behind the constantly shifting patterns of light beneath her translucent skin. There was an intelligence there, a depth of awareness that made Mara increasingly certain that these light patterns were themselves a form of language, one she couldn't understand, but could perhaps learn to recognize. "Why did you help me?" Mara asked finally, knowing Karina wouldn't understand her words, but hoping the question in her tone would convey her meaning. Karina set down her half-eaten nutrient bar and raised both hands, palms forward. The light patterns intensified, flowing from her chest to her fingertips in complex, interwoven streams. She gestured toward the viewport, where the twin suns of Ecosphere 3 were setting in a spectacular display of refracted light through the crystal formations. Then, back to Mara, then to herself. The message was frustratingly opaque, but Mara sensed it had something to do with connection, being in the same place at the same time. Perhaps, or something deeper. "Were you tracking my ship?" she tried again. "Did you know I was in trouble?" Another series of light patterns, different this time. Karina pointed to her own chest, then made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the ship, the planet, the stars beyond. Then she touched her temple, the light beneath her skin pulsing rapidly. "You sensed me," Mara guessed. "Or the ship, or the—" Her eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The biocrystals. You sensed the biocrystals." Karina's light patterns flared brightly, and she nodded emphatically, touching her chest again before pointing toward the cargo hold. Mara's mind raced with implications. The biocrystals were rare and poorly understood, harvested from the depths of gas giants, where pressure and energy created lattices of seemingly impossible complexity. Research had shown they could store and process information in ways that defied conventional computing logic, but their full potential remained largely theoretical. And here was a being whose biology seemed to incorporate similar principles, living crystalline structures that processed information through light, rather than electrical impulses. "The crystals are like you," Mara said slowly. "Or related to you somehow? Part of your biology?" Karina's response was a complex dance of light that flowed across her entire visible skin, culminating in a pattern that centered on her chest, her heart, or whatever equivalent organ occupied that space in her anatomy. Before Mara could formulate another question, the ship's proximity alert chimed softly. Someone had decoded the emergency beacon signal and was responding. Mara hurried to the bridge, Karina following close behind. The communication system had rebooted sufficiently to receive basic transmissions. Mara activated the screen, expecting, hoping, to see a Federation rescue vessel's identification code. Instead, the screen displayed a string of symbols she didn't recognize, followed by a message in heavily accented standard. Attention unidentified vessel. You have illegally harvested sacred material from protected space. Prepare to be boarded and surrender all crystalline artifacts. Resistance will result in immediate termination. Mara's blood ran cold. Not the Talon Consortium after all, but something potentially worse. A species with claims on the biocrystals. Claims they were evidently willing to enforce with deadly force. She turned to Karina, who was staring at the message with an expression Mara could only describe as dread. Her luminescent patterns dimmed to a pale flicker. "You know them," Mara said. It wasn't a question. Karina nodded slowly, then raised her hands. The light patterns that flowed from her fingertips formed distinct shapes in the air. Shapes that matched some of the symbols in the incoming message. "They're your people," Mara realized. "And they're coming for you as much as for the crystals, aren't they?" Karina's only response was to place one glowing hand on the communication panel. Instantly, the screen filled with new information, data streaming too fast for Mara to comprehend, but which Karina appeared to absorb directly through her bioluminescent interface. When she withdrew her hand, her light patterns had shifted dramatically, rapid, agitated pulses that reminded Mara of a racing heartbeat. She gestured urgently to the navigation controls, then to the engineering section. Her meaning clear. "We need to leave. Now." "What did you see?" Mara demanded, already moving to the navigation console. "What aren't you telling me?" Karina's response was to access the ship's rudimentary visual projection system. With evident effort, she converted the data she'd downloaded into images Mara could understand. Images of herself, Karina, captured by long-range sensors. The final image showed them working together on the ship repairs. Karina's repair suit partially removed, her bioluminescent skin exposed. Text scrolled beneath the images. "Fugitive Karina has contacted human vessel. Evidence of forbidden bonding detected. Retrieval team dispatched. Termination protocols authorized for both subjects." "Bonding?" Mara echoed, looking from the screen to Karina. "What does that mean? And why would they want to kill us both for it?" Karina's luminescent patterns formed a new configuration, one Mara hadn't seen before. It reminded her of a solar flare, bright energy spiraling outward from a central point, reaching towards something beyond itself. Then, Karina did something unexpected. She stepped forward and took Mara's hand in her own, the glow beneath her skin intensifying where they touched. A sensation like gentle electricity flowed up Mara's arm, bringing with it, not pain, but a cascade of impressions. Isolation, discovery, wonder, fear, and something deeper, more complex, that Mara couldn't quite name. "You're trying to tell me something important," Mara said softly, resisting the urge to pull her hand away from the strange, but not unpleasant sensation. "Something about why they're after you." Karina nodded, her free hand gesturing toward the approaching ship, then making a slicing motion across her throat, the universal gesture for death. "They'll kill you if they find you," Mara translated. "Because you... what? Deserted? Broke some law? Is it because you helped me?" The light patterns in Karina's hand pulsed in time with Mara's questions, flaring brightest at the last one. "Contact with humans is forbidden," Mara guessed. "But you did it anyway. You saved me anyway." Karina squeezed Mara's hand gently, her luminescent eyes holding Mara's gaze with an intensity that transcended their communication barriers. In that moment, Mara made her decision. Whatever Karina's reasons, whatever complicated politics existed between her species and humanity, one fact remained clear. They had saved each other. That created a bond Mara wasn't willing to break. "We're getting out of here," she said firmly, releasing Karina's hand to focus on the navigation controls. "Together. I don't know where we'll go, but I'm not handing you over to anyone who wants to kill you for helping me." Karina's light patterns shifted into what Mara was beginning to recognize as gratitude. She moved to the engineering station, her partially exposed skin glowing more intensely as she interfaced directly with the ship's systems, boosting their performance beyond what should have been possible with the damaged components. The freighter's engines hummed to life, vibrating through the deck plates as power flowed to systems that had been dark hours earlier. Mara plotted a course away from the approaching vessel, using Ecosphere the 3's crystalline mountains as cover, while they built up enough speed to break orbit. "They'll be in range in approximately 20 minutes, she calculated, studying the sensor readings. "We need a head start and a destination they won't expect. Any suggestions?" Karina accessed the navigation database, light patterns flowing from her fingertips into the ship's computer. A star chart appeared on the main screen, with a route highlighted in pulsing blue, leading to a small, unnamed system near the edge of the galactic arm. "Is that where you're from?" Mara asked, examining the coordinates. "Or somewhere you think will be safe?" Karina's response was another complex light pattern that Mara couldn't interpret, followed by a gesture that seemed to encompass both of them. Then the stars. "Together," Mara translated, understanding at least that much. "We'll figure it out together." She engaged the engines, feeling the ship strain against Ecosphere's gravity well. With Karina channeling additional power through her bioluminescent interface, they achieved escape velocity several minutes faster than Mara had calculated possible. The pursuing vessel adjusted course immediately, accelerating to match their trajectory. It was larger than Mara's freighter and likely better armed. But her ship was more maneuverable, especially with Karina's enhancements boosting its performance. "Hold on," Mara warned as she executed a series of evasive maneuvers, skimming dangerously close to Ecosphere's upper atmosphere before slingshotting around its smaller moon. The pursuing vessel fell behind momentarily, giving them a brief advantage. "We can't outrun them forever," Mara said, more to herself than to Karina. "We need a plan." Karina seemed to understand the dilemma. She gestured to the communications array, then to her own chest, her light patterns forming a question. "You want to talk to them?" Mara asked, incredulous. "They just said they want to terminate us both." Karina's expression was solemn, her luminescence pulsing steadily as she nodded. "I don't like it," Mara said after a moment's consideration. "But I don't see many alternatives. If you think you can reason with them—" She activated the communication system, allowing Karina access to the transmitter. The alien's hands glowed intensely as she interfaced with the equipment, sending a message in her species' language, or at least, their digital equivalent of language. The response was immediate and evidently negative, judging by the way Karina's light patterns dimmed momentarily before resuming their determined pulse. "What did they say?" Mara asked, splitting her attention between the navigation controls and her alien companion. Karina gestured to the long-range sensors, which showed the pursuing vessel deploying smaller craft, interceptors, Mara guessed, designed to disable rather than destroy their target. Then, Karina pointed to her own chest, made a leaving motion, and pointed to Mara with what seemed like regret in her luminescent eyes. "They want you to surrender yourself," Mara translated. "And they'll let me go?" Karina nodded, her light patterns forming a complex, spiraling configuration that somehow conveyed both resignation and resolve. "Absolutely not," Mara said firmly. "That's not an option. We stay together." Karina's luminescence flared brightly at Mara's words, patterns shifting rapidly in what might have been surprise or emotion. She reached out, hesitantly, and touched Mara's hand again, sending that same gentle electrical sensation up her arm, but this time The impressions were clearer, more focused, gratitude, determination, and something warmer that made Mara's heart beat faster. "We need a new plan," Mara said, trying to focus on their tactical situation rather than the strange intimacy of the moment. "If we can't outrun them, and we won't surrender, we need to either hide or fight." Fighting seemed like a poor option. Her freighter carried only basic defensive measures, enough to deter pirates, but not to engage in combat with what appeared to be a military vessel. Hiding. Then, "The asteroid field," she said suddenly, pointing to a dense cluster of space debris at the edge of the system. "We can lose them in there. It's risky. But with your abilities enhancing our systems, I think we can navigate it safely. They'd have to slow down to follow us, and those interceptors would be at a disadvantage in close quarters." Karina studied the sensor display, her light patterns suggesting careful calculation. Then she nodded, moving to the engineering station to prepare the ship's systems for the demanding maneuvers ahead. Mara plotted their course, pushing the engines to maximum sustainable output. The freighter responded with surprising agility. Karina's interface with the ship's systems, allowing for finer control than the standard navigation protocols could provide. They reached the asteroid field, minutes ahead of their pursuers, plunging into the chaotic environment of tumbling rocks and dust clouds. Mara's hands flew over the controls, making micro-adjustments to their trajectory as massive chunks of stone and metal drifted past the viewport. "They're following us in," she reported, glancing at the sensor display. "But they're having to slow down significantly. The interceptors are holding position at the field's edge. Too risky for them to enter." Karina nodded, her attention focused on maintaining power to the shields and maneuvering thrusters. Her luminescent skin pulsed in rhythm with the ship's systems, the patterns shifting and adapting as she compensated for stress on different components. For nearly an hour, they wove their way through the treacherous field. Mara's piloting skills combined with Karina's enhancements, allowing them to navigate paths that would have been impossible otherwise. The pursuing vessel fell further behind, eventually losing track of them among the larger asteroids. "I think we've lost them," Mara said finally, allowing herself a moment of cautious optimism. "We should find a place to hide, power down non-essential systems, and wait until they give up the search." Karina indicated agreement, pointing to a particularly large asteroid with a concave depression on one side, natural camouflage for a ship their size. Mara carefully maneuvered into position, nestling the freighter against the rocky surface before shutting down the engines and most external sensors. In the sudden quiet, with only the essential life support systems humming softly in the background, Mara became acutely aware of Karina's presence beside her. The alien's luminescence provided the primary illumination on the dimmed bridge, casting everything in a soft blue glow that pulsed gently with what Mara was beginning to think of as Karina's emotional state. "Thank you," Mara said quietly, turning to face her companion, "for helping me repair the ship, for warning me about the retrieval team, for everything." Karina's light patterns shifted into the configuration Mara now recognized as acknowledgement or gratitude. Then, with deliberate movements, she removed more of her repair suit until her entire upper body was exposed, the complex luminescent patterns flowing freely across her translucent skin. Mara watched, fascinated, as the patterns organized themselves into more intricate formations than she had seen before, spirals and waves that reminded her of ancient Earth calligraphy, but alive with light and meaning. "You're trying to tell me something important," Mara guessed. "About why your people are hunting you." Karina nodded, then hesitantly extended both hands, palms up, an invitation. Mara understood instinctively what was being offered. A deeper communication, perhaps. She placed her hands in Karina's, feeling that now familiar electrical sensation spread up her arms and throughout her body. But this time, it didn't stop at mere impressions. Images formed in Mara's mind, memories she realized, but not her own. Karina's. She saw a world of crystal spires and luminescent beings, a civilization built around the manipulation of light and energy. She saw Karina as a scientist, studying the biocrystals, which her people called heartstones, and discovering properties in them that others had overlooked or deliberately ignored. She saw Karina's growing fascination with humanity, secretly observing their ships and outposts, learning their technology and language. She saw the strict laws of Karina's society that forbade contact with other species, especially humans, who were viewed as dangerously unpredictable and potentially hostile to crystalline life forms. And she saw Karina's decision to break those laws when she detected Mara's distress signal, a choice made not from political rebellion, but from simple compassion, and perhaps curiosity. Most strikingly, Mara saw the concept her people called bonding, a deep, bioenergetic connection between luminescent beings, formed through shared experience and mutual vulnerability. It was something between friendship and love in human terms, but with a physical component unique to Karina's species, the literal synchronization of their bioluminescent patterns, creating a resonance that enhanced both individuals. And Karina's people believed such a bond had begun to form between her and Mara, an impossible, forbidden thing that threatened their society's most fundamental beliefs about separation and purity. The connection broke as Karina gently withdrew her hands, her luminescent eyes watching Mara with evident concern, fear, perhaps, of how the human would react to such intimate knowledge. "I saw," Mara said softly. "I understand. At least, I think I do. Your people think we've formed some kind of connection, a bond, and that frightens them." Karina nodded, her light patterns shifting into a configuration that somehow expressed both affirmation and question. "Yes. But what do you think?" Mara considered her response carefully. The concept of bonding, as Karina's people understood it, was alien to her. Yet, she couldn't deny the strange connection she felt to this luminescent being. They had saved each other, worked together, fled together. In the space of a day, Karina had become more important to her than most humans she'd known for years. Was that a bond, or simply the natural result of shared danger and mutual dependence? "I don't know what to call what's between us," Mara said finally, meeting Karina's gaze directly. "But I know I won't let them take you. I know I want to understand you better, and I know I'm glad you found me on that ice planet, whatever your reasons were." Karina's luminescence brightened dramatically, patterns flowing in what seemed like joy or relief. She reached out again, this time not to take Mara's hands, but to touch her face gently, fingertips leaving traces of tingling warmth wherever they made contact. The moment was interrupted by a proximity alert, muted due to their powered-down state, but still audible on the bridge. The pursuing vessel had not given up the search and was methodically scanning the asteroid field. "They're persistent," Mara muttered, checking the sensor readings. "But they're still several sectors away. As long as we stay powered down, they shouldn't detect us." Karina's expression turned solemn, her light patterns dimming to a more subdued pulse. She gestured to the chronometer, then made a circular motion. "Time? How long?" "How long can we hide?" Mara translated. "I'm not sure. We have supplies for a few weeks, if we're careful. But eventually, we'll need to move on. The biocrystals are due at Research Outpost Helios, and my superiors will be expecting a report." Karina's light patterns shifted into a new configuration, one Mara hadn't seen before. It reminded her of a question mark, spiraling outward from a central point. "You're asking what happens to you when we reach the outpost," Mara guessed. "I don't know. Officially, I should report first contact with a new species. But given the circumstances..." She trailed off, considering the implications. Earth Federation protocols for first contact were clear. Any new species encountered should be reported immediately, with all relevant data transmitted to Central Command for analysis. But those protocols assumed neutral or positive initial contact, not a situation where the new species was actively hunting one of their own for the crime of helping a human. Reporting Karina's existence might endanger her further, yet failing to report would violate Mara's oath as a Federation officer. Before she could articulate these concerns, the proximity alert sounded again, louder this time, and with greater urgency. "They've changed course," Mara said, studying the sensor display with growing alarm. "They're heading directly for our position. How could they have found us?" Karina's light patterns flared in what might have been realization or dismay. She pointed to her own chest, then to the ship's communication array, which remained powered down. "They're tracking you somehow?" Mara asked. "Through some kind of biological signature?" Karina nodded, her expression grave. She gestured to the engine controls, then to the asteroid field's edge. "We need to run." "If they can track you, running won't help for long," Mara said, though she was already powering up the necessary systems for departure. "We need a more permanent solution." Karina's light patterns formed a complex, spiraling configuration that somehow conveyed determination and resignation simultaneously. She pointed to herself, then to the airlock, then made a pushing away gesture. "Absolutely not," Mara said firmly, understanding the suggestion immediately. "I am not jettisoning you into space to save myself. There has to be another way." Karina's expression softened, her luminescence pulsing in what Mara was beginning to recognize as affection. She touched Mara's hand briefly, sending a gentle current of gratitude through the contact, then moved to the engineering station. With rapid, precise movements, Karina interfaced directly with the ship's systems, her luminescent patterns flowing into the circuitry like living data. Information flashed across the screens faster than Mara could process. Schematics and calculations and energy distributions rearranging themselves under Karina's guidance. "What are you doing?" Mara asked, watching in amazement as systems she hadn't even known existed activated under Karina's touch. The alien didn't pause in her work, but her light patterns formed a brief, clear image in the air between them, a shield, expanding outward from a central point. Then, she pointed to her chest, to the biocrystals in the cargo hold, and finally, to the pursuing vessel. "You're trying to mask your signature," Mara realized. "Using the biocrystals to... what? Create interference? Camouflage?" Karina nodded, her luminescence intensifying as she channeled more energy into whatever process she was initiating. The biocrystals in the cargo hold began to pulse in sync with her own light patterns, their glow visible on the internal monitors, despite the containment units designed to shield them. The ship's power levels fluctuated wildly as energy was redirected to this new configuration. Lights dimmed, then brightened, then stabilized at a lower intensity. The temperature dropped several degrees as environmental controls adjusted to the reduced power allocation. On the sensor display, the pursuing vessel's course wobbled, then shifted, turning away from their hiding place to scan a different section of the asteroid field. "It's working," Mara breathed, watching as their hunters moved further away. "They've lost your trail." Karina's luminescence dimmed noticeably, her slender form sagging against the console as though the effort had drained her considerably. Mara moved quickly to support her, guiding her to the captain's chair. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern overriding her excitement at their temporary reprieve. "What did you do?" Karina's light patterns pulsed weakly, forming brief, simplified images that Mara struggled to interpret. Something about resonance frequencies and energy signatures, but the details were lost in translation. What was clear, however, was that maintaining this camouflage was taxing Karina's strength significantly. "How long can you keep this up?" Mara asked, gesturing to the sensor display where the pursuing vessel continued its search in the wrong direction. Karina held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the chronometer. 3 hours? Mara guessed. That should be enough time for us to slip away, if we're careful. But you need to rest first. You look depleted. She helped Karina to her quarters. The alien's normally fluid movements, now sluggish and uncoordinated. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin had dimmed to a pale flicker, pulsing erratically in what Mara assumed was the equivalent of exhaustion. Here, Mara said, helping Karina onto the narrow bunk. Rest. I'll monitor the sensors and wake you if anything changes. Karina caught Mara's hand as she turned to leave, her light patterns forming a brief but clear message. Thank you. No need for thanks, Mara said softly. We're in this together, remember? She returned to the bridge, checking their situation on all available sensors. The pursuing vessel had moved to the far side of the asteroid field, still searching methodically, but in entirely the wrong area. They had a window of opportunity, if they used it wisely. Mara plotted several possible escape routes, analyzing each for speed, stealth, and the likelihood of encountering other ships that might report their position. The safest option seemed to be a circuitous path through a nearby nebula, where sensor readings would be naturally distorted by radiation and particulate matter. From there, they could make their way to the edge of Federation space, where Mara had contacts who might help them, smugglers and fringe colonists who asked few questions and valued their privacy. It wouldn't be a permanent solution, but it would buy them time to figure out their next steps. She was still refining the details when Karina returned to the bridge, her movement steadier and her luminescence brighter after even a brief rest. The alien studied Mara's navigation plans with evident interest, her light patterns suggesting approval of the nebula route. You're feeling better? Mara asked, noting with relief that the complex patterns beneath Karina's skin had resumed their normal, flowing rhythm. Karina nodded, placing one hand on her chest and making an expanding gesture. Stronger now. Good. We should leave soon, while they're still searching the wrong sector. Can you maintain that camouflage while we're moving? Or does it only work when we're stationary? Karina's response was to move to the engineering station, where she once again interfaced directly with the ship's systems. The biocrystals in the cargo hold pulsed in harmony with her luminescent patterns, their energy signatures merging and shifting in ways the sensors struggled to quantify. After several minutes of silent communion with the ship's technology, Karina turned back to Mara with a nod. Ready? All right, Mara said, taking her position at the navigation console. Let's get out of here. Nice and slow at first. Minimal power signatures until we're clear of the asteroid field. She engaged the maneuvering thrusters at their lowest setting, easing the freighter away from its hiding place with delicate precision. The ship responded beautifully, Karina's enhancements allowing for finer control than the standard systems would have permitted. They moved through the asteroid field like a ghost, leaving barely a ripple in the energy patterns that the pursuers were monitoring. Karina maintained her strange communion with the biocrystals, her luminescence pulsing in complex rhythms that somehow masked their presence from detection. As they approached the edge of the field, Mara held her breath. This was the most dangerous moment, when they would need to engage the main engines and make a run for the nebula. If Karina's camouflage failed, they would be exposed in open space with nowhere to hide. Ready? She asked, hands poised over the engine controls. Karina nodded, her light patterns intensifying as she prepared to channel more energy into their protective shroud. Mara engaged the engines, feeling the familiar vibration as power flowed through the ship's systems. They accelerated smoothly, breaking free of the asteroid field's gravitational influence and turning toward the distant nebula. The sensor display remained clear, no indication that the pursuing vessel had detected their movement. Karina's camouflage was holding, though Mara could see the strain it was placing on her alien companion. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin flickered erratically, dimming in some areas while intensifying in others, as though she were redirecting her own internal energy to maintain the deception. "Just a little longer," Mara encouraged her, pushing the engines harder now that they were in open space. "Once we reach the nebula, we can reduce power and let the natural interference cover our trail." They had covered perhaps half the distance to the nebula when the proximity alert sounded. A new contact, approaching rapidly from the opposite direction. "Another ship," Mara reported, checking the sensors. "Not the same class as our pursuers, but on an intercept course. Federation registry." Her eyes widened as she recognized the identification code. "It's a rescue vessel. They must have picked up our distress beacon." Karina's light patterns shifted into what Mara interpreted as alarm. She gestured urgently to the communication array, then made a cutting motion across her throat. "You want me to ignore them?" Mara asked, understanding the concern immediately. "If I respond to their hail, your people might intercept the transmission and find us." Karina nodded, her luminescence pulsing rapidly in what seemed like anxiety or fear. She pointed to the nebula, then to the pursuing vessel, which was still searching the asteroid field, unaware of their escape. Mara faced a dilemma. Federation protocol required her to respond to a rescue hail, especially after activating a distress beacon. Failure to do so could be considered dereliction of duty, or worse, depending on the circumstances. But responding would almost certainly reveal their position to Karina's people, putting them both in danger once more. "I have an idea," she said finally. "We'll respond, but with a coded message that only Federation ships will understand. I'll tell them we're under pursuit and to maintain communication silence. Then we continue to the nebula as planned." Karina considered this suggestion, her light patterns suggesting cautious approval. She gestured to the communication array, indicating that Mara should proceed. Mara composed a brief, encrypted message using a Federation emergency protocol, acknowledging the rescue vessel's approach, but warning of hostile pursuers and requesting communication silence until they reached the safety of the nebula. She sent the transmission on the narrowest possible beam, directing it precisely at the approaching Federation ship to minimize the chance of interception. The response came seconds later, equally brief, equally encrypted. The rescue vessel would follow them to the nebula, maintaining distance and communication silence as requested. "They understand," Mara told Karina with relief. "Now we just need to reach the nebula before your people realize we've escaped the asteroid field." Karina nodded, her luminescence steadying as she focused her energy on maintaining their camouflage for the final stretch of their journey. The nebula loomed larger in the viewport, its swirling clouds of gas and dust promising temporary sanctuary from their pursuers. They were less than 5 minutes from the nebula's outer boundary when disaster struck. The pursuing vessel, having completed its sweep of the asteroid field without finding any trace of them, changed course abruptly, heading directly for the nebula, as though guessing their destination through sheer logic or intuition. "They're going to cut us off," Mara said, watching the projected course with growing alarm. "We won't reach the nebula before they intercept us." Karina's light patterns flared in what might have been determination or desperation. She moved to the center of the bridge, removing the remainder of her repair suit until she stood fully exposed, her entire body glowing with increasing intensity. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin shifted into configurations more complex than any Mara had seen before, geometric structures that seemed to fold in on themselves, creating depth where there should have been only surface. The biocrystals in the cargo hold pulsed in perfect synchronization, their energy readings spiking beyond the sensor's ability to measure. "What are you doing?" Mara asked, both fascinated and alarmed by the display. Karina didn't respond directly, her attention focused entirely on whatever process she had initiated. The ship's systems fluctuated wildly, power surging through circuits in patterns that defied standard engineering logic. The lights dimmed, then brightened to painful intensity, before stabilizing at a soft, golden hue that matched Karina's luminescence. On the sensor display, their own signal multiplied and fragmented, creating dozens of ghost images spreading outward in all directions, each one a perfect replica of their energy signature, indistinguishable from the original. "You're creating decoys," Mara realized, watching as the pursuing vessel slowed, evidently confused by the sudden proliferation of potential targets. Splitting their attention, Karina nodded, though the movement seemed to cost her considerable effort. Her luminescence was dimming rapidly now, the complex patterns losing coherence as her energy reserves depleted. "The nebula," Mara urged, engaging the engines at maximum sustainable output. Just a little further. They crossed the nebula's boundary with the pursuing vessel still hesitating among the phantom signals, unable to determine which was the true target. The dense clouds of gas and dust enveloped their ship like a protective blanket, natural radiation and particulate matter further obscuring their trail. Karina collapsed as soon as they were safely within the nebula's embrace, her luminescence fading to a pale, erratic flicker. Mara caught her before she hit the deck, alarmed by how light the alien felt in her arms, as though she had burned away something essential in creating their escape. "Karina," she called, cradling the alien's slender form. "Stay with me, please." The luminescent patterns beneath Karina's skin pulsed weakly, forming a brief, simple message. "Safe now." "Yes, we're safe," Mara agreed, carrying Karina to her quarters as gently as possible. "Thanks to you. But at what cost?" She laid Karina on the narrow bunk, uncertain what medical care, if any, she could provide for a being whose biology was so fundamentally different from her own. The ship's medical scanner was designed for human physiology. It might do more harm than good if used on Karina's crystalline structures. After a moment's hesitation, Mara made her decision. With careful movements, she retrieved one of the biocrystals from its containment unit in the cargo hold, bringing it to her quarters, where Karina lay motionless except for the faint, irregular pulsing of her luminescence. "I don't know if this will help," Mara said, placing the crystal near Karina's hand. "But I saw how you connected with them earlier. Maybe they can give you back some of what you spent to save us." For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Karina's fingers twitched, reaching for the crystal with evident effort. As soon as contact was made, both Karina and the crystal began to glow more intensely, their light patterns synchronizing into a steady, harmonious rhythm. Mara watched, fascinated and relieved, as color returned to Karina's translucent skin, the luminescent patterns regaining their complexity and coherence. The alien's breathing, or whatever equivalent process sustained her, became deeper and more regular, her earlier exhaustion visibly receding. Eventually, Karina opened her eyes, the luminescent orbs focusing on Mara with what seemed like surprise, then gratitude. She gestured to the biocrystal, now pulsing in perfect harmony with her own light patterns, then to Mara, forming a pattern that somehow conveyed deep appreciation. "You're welcome," Mara said softly. "Though I think I should be thanking you. That was incredible, what you did back there. I've never seen anything like it." Karina's light patterns shifted into what might have been modesty or embarrassment. She sat up carefully, still holding the biocrystal, which continued to pulse in sync with her own luminescence. A gentle chime from the communication system interrupted their moment of quiet recovery. The Federation rescue vessel, maintaining its promised silence, had followed them into the nebula and was requesting permission to approach. "We should meet with them," Mara said, checking the ship's status on her portable terminal. "The nebula will hide us from your pursuers for now, but we need a more permanent solution, and I need to report what happened with the mine and the damage to my ship." Karina's light patterns suggested hesitation, even fear. She gestured to herself, then made a questioning motion. "What about me?" "I won't let them take you or study you or whatever you're worried about," Mara promised. "As far as they'll know, you're my passenger, a friend. We'll figure out the details together." The uncertainty in Karina's luminescence didn't entirely fade, but she nodded her agreement, her light patterns forming a simple but clear message: trust you. Those two concepts, conveyed through light rather than sound, affected Mara more deeply than she had expected. Trust, freely given despite the risks, was a precious thing, one she vowed silently not to betray. They prepared to meet the Federation rescue team together. Karina, donning her repair suit once more, but leaving her hands and face exposed, a compromise between protection and openness. Mara sent a brief message to the approaching vessel, requesting that only the captain and medical officer board her ship, citing concerns about structural integrity after the mine damage. The rescue vessel acknowledged her request, maneuvering alongside the freighter with practiced precision. Through the viewport, Mara could see it was a standard Federation emergency response craft, well armed, but primarily designed for search and rescue operations in dangerous territory. The airlock cycled, admitting two figures in Federation uniforms: a tall, dark-skinned woman with captain's insignia, and a shorter, older man with a medical kit and the blue stripe of a medical officer. "Captain Eliza Chen," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand to Mara. "This is Dr. Sam Reeve. We picked up your distress beacon about 18 hours ago and have been tracking you since. Looks like you've had quite the adventure." "Captain Mara Klein," Mara responded, shaking the offered hand. "And you have no idea." Dr. Reeve's attention had already fixed on Karina, his expression shifting from professional concern to undisguised wonder. "Is your companion injured?" he asked, medical training evidently overriding his curiosity momentarily. "We picked up unusual energy readings from your ship. She's recovering," Mara said carefully. "There was an incident with a stealth mine, Talon Consortium design, but not their usual operational area. My ship was damaged, and Karina helped me repair it. She expended a lot of energy in the process." Captain Chen's gaze moved from Mara to Karina, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. "And Karina is—" she prompted. Mara hesitated, unsure how to explain Karina's presence without revealing the full, complicated truth. Before she could formulate a response, Karina stepped forward, her luminescent patterns shifting into a configuration Mara hadn't seen before. Formal, almost ceremonial in its geometric precision. Then, to Mara's astonishment, Karina spoke aloud for the first time. "Mara," she said, her voice musical and slightly resonant, as though multiple tones were layered together. The single word seemed to cost her considerable effort, but its effect was immediate and profound. Captain Chen's professional demeanor cracked slightly, her eyes widening in surprise. Dr. Reeve actually took a step back, his medical scanner forgotten in his hand. "You can speak our language," Chen said after a moment of shocked silence. Karina didn't respond verbally again, instead returning to her light patterns, which formed a simple affirmative gesture before she turned to Mara, as though deferring to her to explain. "Karina has been learning our language," Mara said, still processing the shock of hearing her name spoken aloud. "But verbal communication is difficult for her. She normally communicates through light patterns." "Fascinating," Dr. Reeve murmured, his scientific curiosity evidently overcoming his initial surprise. "And you can understand these patterns?" "Some of them," Mara admitted. "We've developed a kind of shorthand. But there's another situation you need to be aware of. The reason we're hiding in this nebula." She explained the pursuit, carefully editing certain details, mentioning only that Karina's people had tracked them and seemed intent on retrieving her, without specifying the reason or the bonding that had triggered their aggressive response. She described the stealth mine, the emergency repairs, and their narrow escape from the asteroid field. "So this vessel is still searching for you," Captain Chen summarized, her expression thoughtful. "And they've made hostile intent clear. That puts this under Federation jurisdiction, threat to a Federation citizen, and vessel in neutral space. My immediate concern is getting my ship repaired properly and delivering my cargo," Mara said. "The biocrystals are still needed at Research Outpost Helios. But I won't abandon Karina to her pursuers. She saved my life." Captain Chen and Dr. Reeve exchanged a glance that Mara couldn't interpret. Then Chen nodded decisively. "We'll escort you to the nearest Federation starbase, Outpost 47. It's 3 days from here at standard speed. They have repair facilities that can handle the damage to your ship, and better defensive capabilities than we can provide if these pursuers find you again." "And Karina?" Mara asked, acutely aware of the alien's luminescence pulsing more rapidly beside her. Anxiety, perhaps, or concern about her fate. "Will remain under your protection as your guest," Chen said firmly. "First contact protocols apply, which means no invasive studies or questioning without consent. Dr. Reeve can provide medical assistance if needed, but otherwise, we respect her autonomy." The tension in Karina's luminescent patterns eased visibly at these words. She inclined her head to Captain Chen in what seemed like gratitude, her light patterns forming a brief, elegant configuration. "She says thank you," Mara translated, though she sensed the actual message was more complex than that simple phrase could convey. "We'll begin preparations immediately," Captain Chen said, turning back to Mara. "Our engineers can assist with temporary repairs to ensure your ship can maintain speed for the journey to Outpost 47. Dr. Reeve will remain aboard to monitor both your conditions, if that's acceptable." Mara nodded her agreement, relief washing over her at the prospect of Federation protection and proper repairs for her damaged vessel. The immediate crisis, at least, was passing. As Captain Chen returned to her ship to coordinate the escort arrangements, Dr. Reeve set up a small medical station in Mara's quarters, diplomatically focusing his attention on treating Mara's minor injuries, rather than openly studying Karina. "The captain seems to be taking this all rather calmly," Mara observed as he applied a regenerative patch to a plasma burn on her forearm, souvenir of their hasty repairs. "Captain Chen has seen her share of unusual encounters," Reeve replied with a small smile. "And first contact protocols are quite clear. Besides, she's more concerned with the hostile vessel pursuing you than with the nature of your companion." He glanced at Karina, who stood by the viewport, her luminescence reflecting off the swirling nebula clouds beyond. The effect was striking, light patterns echoing through light patterns, creating a visual harmony that seemed almost deliberate. "She's remarkable," he added quietly. "I've never encountered a species with bioluminescent communication before. The implications for medicine alone are fascinating. Direct biological interface with technology. If she were willing to share some information about her physiology." "That would be her decision," Mara said firmly. "And right now, I think she needs rest more than she needs to satisfy scientific curiosity." Dr. Reeve accepted the gentle rebuke with good grace, finishing his treatment in silence before packing up his medical kit. "I'll be on the rescue vessel if either of you need anything," he said, moving toward the door. "We'll begin escort preparations at 800 ship time tomorrow. Try to get some rest. Captain Klein, you've had quite an ordeal." After he left, Mara joined Karina at the viewport, watching the nebula's slow dance of gas and energy. The alien's luminescence had stabilized into a steady, peaceful rhythm, suggesting she had recovered significantly from her earlier exhaustion. "You spoke," Mara said finally, still processing that moment of revelation. "You said my name." Karina turned to face her, light patterns forming a complex but somehow intimate configuration. She touched her throat, then her chest, then gestured to Mara, a meaningful connection of concepts that Mara couldn't quite translate. Was it difficult speaking aloud? Karina nodded, her luminescence pulsing in what might have been rueful acknowledgement. She formed another pattern, this one suggesting effort and purpose. Worth it. Why? Mara asked softly. Why say my name, of all possible words? Karina's response was to reach out and take Mara's hand gently in her own, the now familiar current of energy flowing between them. But this time, the impressions were clearer, more focused: trust, connection, choice. The concept Karina's people called bonding, but which Mara was beginning to understand as something deeper and more profound than its simple translation suggested. The golden light, Mara remembered suddenly. When your luminescence changed color during the confrontation with your pursuers? What did that mean? Karina's light patterns shifted into the same golden hue Mara had glimpsed briefly during their escape. She placed her free hand over her chest, where a human heart would be, and formed a pattern that somehow conveyed absolute certainty. A choice made, a path chosen, a bond accepted. It's important to your people, Mara guessed. A significant gesture. Karina nodded, her golden luminescence intensifying. She traced a pattern in the air between them, two separate spirals of light that gradually merged into a single, more complex structure. Bonding, Mara said softly. What your people forbid with other species. What they were willing to kill you for. Another nod, solemn but without regret. Karina's light patterns formed a question, directed at Mara with unmistakable meaning. Do you understand? Do you accept? Mara considered her response carefully. The concept of bonding, as Karina understood it, was still foreign to her, its full implications unclear. Yet she couldn't deny the connection that had formed between them, forged in crisis, strengthened by mutual protection, and now evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. I don't fully understand what this means to you or your people, she said honestly. But I know that I trust you. I know that I want you safe. And I know that whatever happens next, I want us to face it together. Karina's luminescence brightened at these words, the golden hue spreading throughout her visible skin. She stepped closer, the light patterns beneath her translucent skin forming configurations of increasing complexity and beauty. Then, with gentle deliberation, she pressed her forehead against Mara's, a gesture so unexpected, yet so natural that Mara found herself responding instinctively, leaning into the contact. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced before, a harmony of energy and thought, not mind-reading but a deeper awareness of another's presence and essence. Emotions flowed between them like currents in a shared ocean. Karina's wonder and determination, Mara's curiosity and protective instinct, and beneath it all, a growing warmth that defied simple categorization. When they finally separated, Karina's luminescence had shifted permanently to the golden hue, a visible symbol of whatever transformation had occurred between them. Her light patterns formed a simple but profound message, one Mara understood without hesitation or doubt. Chosen partner, new journey, together. Together, Mara agreed softly, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, Karina's pursuers, Federation protocols, the vast differences between their species and cultures, they would face them as one. Outside the viewport, the nebula continued its ancient dance, streams of light and energy intertwining in patterns, not unlike Karina's luminescent language. The twin suns of a distant system peeked through the swirling clouds, casting golden rays across the bridge of the damaged freighter. A new day, a new journey, together.